Alright, let's explore the deep, mirror jelly. 520 million years ago, in the shallow tropical seas of what is now southern China, something drifted through the water that had no brain, no heart, no bones, and no blood. It had no eyes, it had no ears, it had no stomach in any sense we would recognize, and yet it was hunting. The fossil beds of the Chengjiang biota in Yunnan Province have preserved its relatives in extraordinary detail, locking them in stone at the precise moment the animal kingdom was still deciding what life was allowed to become. Before the Chengjiang creatures existed, the ocean had spent billions of years running quiet experiments in single-celled obscurity. The Cambrian explosion, beginning roughly 540 million years ago, changed that overnight in geological terms. Suddenly, the seas were crowded with bodies, limbs, eyes, and mouths. Into this chaotic new world, the comb jelly arrived not as a newcomer, but as something that had already been there, already refined, already perfected, in ways that would not be understood for another 500 million years. What makes the mirror jelly genuinely unsettling is not its appearance, though its appearance is strange enough. 8 rows of iridescent comb plates, made of fused cilia, beat in coordinated waves and refract light into shifting rainbow patterns as it moves. It is breathtakingly beautiful. It is also, scientifically, impossible by every rule that should govern animal life. Research published in Nature in 2014 by Leonid Moroz and colleagues at the University of Florida confirmed that ctenophores evolve their nervous systems completely independently from every other animal on Earth. The brain, or something functioning as one, was invented twice. These creatures use different neurotransmitters, different signaling chemicals, a different biological language than anything else alive. The consequences of that discovery are still reverberating through biology. It means that complex thought, complex predation, complex behavior did not arise once and spread. It arose separately, in parallel, from different raw materials. And the version the mirror jelly runs on is older, stranger, and less understood than our own. It has no anus. Waste exits through the mouth. It cannibalizes its own larvae when food grows scarce. It has survived every mass extinction this planet has produced, at least 5 by current count, outlasting armored fish, giant reptiles, and entire continental configurations. If evolution is an argument, the mirror jelly has been making its case for over 500 million years without revising a single sentence. If the ocean invented the mind twice, what else has it invented that we have not yet found? Abyss Wraith. 360 million years ago, the late Devonian Ocean was dying. Not slowly, not peacefully, but in pulses, waves of extinction rolling through the water as oxygen drained from the deep zones and the seafloor turned silent. 75% of all species on Earth would be erased, but something survived in the dead zones. Something patient, something that had already learned to live where nothing else could breathe, and paleontologists working the fossil beds of the Cleveland Shale in Ohio and the Erfoud deposits in Morocco are still trying to understand exactly what that survival cost the ocean afterward. The Devonian is called the Age of Fishes, and for good reason. The seas were dominated by an extraordinary diversity of armored and unarmored vertebrates, many of them apex predators of terrifying capability. Dunkleosteus terrelli, the most famous of the plagiodерm predators, could generate 8,000 newtons of bite force, the strongest ever recorded for any fish in the history of life on Earth. The ocean was not a gentle place before the extinction. It was a crowded, competitive, violent ecosystem running at full capacity. Then the oxygen disappeared. Sediment cores from Devonian seafloor deposits show distinct death layers, bands where oxygen dropped so rapidly that entire benthic communities collapsed within decades rather than millennia. Recent geochemical analysis of these layers suggests the anoxic events were not gradual, they were sudden. The Abyss Wraith category, the deep-adapted, darkness-tolerant, pressure-resistant survivors, did not merely endure the extinction. According to the fossil record, some lineages appear to have thrived in the chaos, colonizing water columns that had been vacated by everything that needed light and oxygen to function. Among the stranger survivors were early relatives of the chimera, ghost sharks that navigated without calcified teeth, crushing prey with mineralized plates instead. Cladocelash, a Devonian shark with a terminal mouth and no calcified dentition, swallowed its prey whole rather than biting through it, a strategy confirmed by fossilized stomach contents found in Cleveland Shale specimens. These were not primitive designs. They were elegant solutions to the specific problem of hunting in oxygen-depleted water in near-total darkness at depth. The ocean did not just kill the weak, in the late Devonian. It ran a selection pressure so extreme that only the creatures built for darkness, stillness, and patience made it through. Everything that came after, every deep-sea predator in the 500 million years since, inherited that blueprint. The abyss wraith did not disappear. It became the template for every monster the ocean has manufactured since. The deep did not forget what it built in the dying Devonian, it simply kept building, black fin horror. 18 centimeters. That is the length of the largest tooth ever recovered from the largest predatory shark that has ever lived. And it was found not in the ocean, but in a desert in Peru, in sediment that was once a warm, shallow sea 20 million years ago. The tooth belongs to Otodes megalodon, and it is serrated along both edges with the precise, deliberate geometry of something engineered specifically to cut through bone. The Natural History Museum in London holds several, so does the Smithsonian. You can hold one in your hand and still not quite believe that the mouth it came from was real. Before megalodon is understood as a creature, it has to be understood as a problem. The problem is that we have never seen it whole. Sharks are built from cartilage, not bone, and cartilage does not fossilize. Every reconstruction, every museum model, every film depiction of this animal is an inference built from teeth and from bite marks left on the bones of prehistoric whales. Whale vertebrae recovered from sites in Peru, South Africa, and North Carolina carry gouges that match megalodon dentition precisely, confirmed through comparative bite force modeling published by Stephen Rowe and colleagues in 2008. The numbers that emerge from that modeling are staggering. Bite force estimates for megalodon range from 108,000 newtons to over 180,000 newtons, roughly 10 times the maximum force of a modern great white shark. The dorsal fin alone, based on proportional scaling, may have stood taller than an average adult human. The full animal is estimated between 15 and 20 meters in length, with some biomechanical models suggesting a more slender body plan, closer to a giant mako than a scaled-up white shark. Which would mean it was not just larger than anything alive today, but potentially faster. Megalodon disappeared approximately 3.6 million years ago. The cause is still debated. Climate cooling changed ocean temperatures. Baleen whale populations, megalodon's primary prey, shifted toward polar waters the shark may not have followed efficiently. Competition from ancestral great white sharks intensified. No single explanation has achieved consensus, and that absence of certainty is its own kind of unease. What lingers is not the size. Size is comprehensible. What lingers is the absence of the skeleton, the fact that we have reconstructed one of the most powerful predators in the history of life from fragments of its mouth and the scars it left on other animals' bones. If we have never found a complete skeleton, how certain are we it is actually gone? Thornback Reaper. 400 million years ago, the shallow reef systems of the Devonian period were not the coral gardens we imagine when we picture ancient seas. They were something stranger and more dangerous, architecturally complex structures built by stromatoporoids and tabulate corals, teeming with a biodiversity 10 times richer than modern reefs, and patrolled by armored predators whose basic mechanical design has never appeared on this planet before or since. The fossils come from what is now Morocco, the Canning Basin of Western Australia, and the Mackenzie Mountains of Canada. All of them once submerged beneath warm equatorial seas, all of them preserving the remains of creatures that operated on engineering principles the ocean has never repeated. The placoderms were the dominant vertebrates of the Devonian, and they were armored. Not lightly armored, not decoratively armored, but encased in interlocking bony plates that covered the head and thorax completely. What made them extraordinary beyond their armor was their jaw mechanics. Every fish alive today, from a goldfish to a great white shark, operates on a jaw system where the lower jaw drops. Placoderms did something different. When a placoderm bit down, the entire skull lifted. The upper and lower jaw units rotated simultaneously in opposite directions, driven by a cranial kinesis system unique in the vertebrate family tree, confirmed through three-dimensional modeling by researchers at the University of Bristol. The gape was enormous, the speed was violent, and the edges of the jaw plates self-sharpened with every bite. In 2008, a paper published in Nature by John Long and colleagues at Museum Victoria in Melbourne announced something that redrew the evolutionary timeline entirely. A placoderm specimen from the Gogo Formation in Western Australia, designated Materpissus attenboroughii in honor of Sir David Attenborough, was found with an embryo preserved inside, connected by a calcified umbilical cord. Internal fertilization, live birth, a maternal bond encoded in stone 380 million years ago. The origin of vertebrate sex was pushed back 30 million years further than anyone had calculated, and then, at the Devonian Carboniferous boundary, every single placoderm species went extinct. Not most of them, all of them. Not a single lineage crossed into the Carboniferous period. Paleontologist John Long has described it as the most catastrophic vertebrate extinction in the history of life, a complete erasure of a body plan and a jaw design that had dominated for 70 million years. The ocean perfected the armored killer, ran the experiment for 70 million years, and then erased every last one of them. What it replaced them with was entirely different. What it replaced them with was faster, softer, and far more recognizable. It replaced them with us. Gulper Revenant. 66 million years ago, within a geological instant of the Chicxulub asteroid impact, up to 90% of all marine species were gone. The ocean, which had spent the entire Cretaceous period building one of the most complex predator hierarchies in the history of life, was suddenly almost empty. Mosasaurus hoffmanni, a marine reptile reaching 17 meters in length, was gone. The long-necked plesiosaurs were gone. The giant ammonites were gone. What remained was a vacancy, a vast, dark, largely silent ocean, with almost nothing at the top of the food chain, and evolution does not tolerate a vacancy for long. Into that silence moved the inheritors, and among the strangest of them were the ancestors of creatures that exist today in the deepest layers of the ocean, fish so specialized for consuming anything available that their bodies became, in essence, a single large mouth with a stomach attached. The gulper eel, Uropharynx pelicanoides, is the living descendant of that post-extinction design philosophy. Its jaws unhinge, its stomach expands. In footage captured by NOAA researchers in 2018 using a remotely operated vehicle in the Pacific, a gulper eel was filmed inflating its body into a translucent sphere, ingesting water and expanding its stomach to an estimated 40 times its resting volume, a behavior documented for the first time in that recording and still not fully explained by the scientists who watched it happen. The bioluminescent tip of the gulper's tail acts as a lure in total darkness, drawing prey toward the mouth waiting at the other end of its body. This strategy evolved independently from the anglerfish, a separate solution to the identical problem of hunting with no light, a parallel invention in deep-sea darkness. Some of the lineages that colonized the deep ocean in the Paleocene, the epoch immediately following the extinction, show fossil evidence of severely reduced eyes, creatures that abandoned vision entirely within a few million years of the asteroid impact and navigated purely through the lateral line system, detecting pressure waves in total blackness. The Hadal Zone, the ocean below 6,000 meters where these lineages ultimately settled, was not comprehensively surveyed until the Five Deeps expedition completed its work in 2019, the first time any vessel had reached the deepest point in each of the world's 5 oceans. What that expedition found in the trenches matched no prior model of what deep-sea ecosystems should look like. If this is what evolution builds when the apex predators disappear, when the ocean is emptied and given permission to start over, what is it building right now in the zones we have still never reached? Sinking Seraph. 95 million years ago, the center of the North American continent was underwater. A shallow inland sea, 970 kilometers wide and 800 meters deep at its maximum extent, split the landmass from the Gulf of Mexico to the Arctic Ocean. Geologists call it the Western Interior Seaway. Today, it is wheat fields in Kansas, cattle ranches in Nebraska, and dry prairie in Alberta. Farmers in that region still occasionally plow up mosasaur teeth from soil that was once open ocean. The sea is gone, but the things that lived in it are preserved in extraordinary detail in the Pierre Shale Formation of South Dakota, and what they reveal about the mid-water column of the Cretaceous is genuinely difficult to process. The most visually striking predator of the Western Interior Seaway was not the mosasaur. It was Tusoteuthis longa, a giant squid reaching estimated lengths of 11 meters, known from fossil gladius fragments, the internal shell remnant, recovered from the Pierre Shale. Comparative anatomy studies published in 2013 confirmed that Tusoteuthis possessed hooks rather than simple suckers on portions of its tentacle rings, hardened grasping structures designed not to hold but to puncture. It shared the seaway with Styxosaurus, a plesiosaur whose neck alone reached 7 meters in length, longer than the rest of its body combined. Styxosaurus belongs to the same genus group as Elasmosaurus, the plesiosaur whose original reconstruction by paleontologist Edward Drinker Cope in 1868 placed the skull on the wrong end of the animal, attaching the head to what was actually the tail. When rival paleontologist Othniel Charles Marsh pointed out the error publicly, the humiliation was severe enough to ignite one of the most destructive feuds in the history of American science, the Bone Wars, a decades-long campaign of sabotage, bribery, and institutional destruction that permanently damaged both men and shaped the field of vertebrate paleontology for a generation. The seaway itself vanished when the Laramide orogeny, the geological event that raised the Rocky Mountains, drained the basin completely. The entire ecosystem, Tusoteuthis, Styxosaurus, the giant fish Siphyctinus that swallowed prey whole and sometimes died with the meal still inside it, all of it went down with the water. No gradual transition, no survivors adapting to new conditions. The world was simply taken away. The sinking seraph did not go extinct, its world was removed, and everything in it went down with the water. Trench maw. In 1977, the research submersible Alvin descended to the seafloor near the Galapagos Rift, 2.5 kilometers below the surface of the Pacific Ocean, and the scientists inside saw something that should not have been possible. Life. Abundant, dense, thriving life, in complete darkness, under crushing pressure, in water so cold it hovered near freezing, with no sunlight whatsoever. Oceanographer Robert Ballard, who would later use the same vessel to locate the wreck of the Titanic, was among those processing what the cameras were showing. The discovery broke the foundational assumption of marine biology, the idea that all ocean life ultimately depended on photosynthesis, on sunlight, on the surface. It did not. Something else was possible. Something else had been happening down there, unobserved and unsuspected, for what may have been billions of years. The energy source was hydrogen sulfide, the chemical that gives rotten eggs their smell. Bacteria living at the hydrothermal vents converted it into biological energy through chemosynthesis, a process with no dependence on light whatsoever. Everything living around the vents ate those bacteria, directly or indirectly. Riftia pachyptila, the giant tube worm, reaches 2.4 meters in length and has no mouth, no stomach, and no digestive system of any kind. It lives entirely on bacteria that colonize its internal tissues, conducting chemosynthesis inside the worm's own body. The worm is, in effect, a living greenhouse for the microbes that feed it. The yeti crab, Kiwa hirsuta, discovered in 2005 near Easter Island, farms bacteria on its own claws. It waves those claws rhythmically through the hydrogen sulfide plume to feed the bacterial colonies growing on the hairs of its arms, then harvests them. The zombie worm, Osidax, discovered in 2002 off the coast of California, has no mouth either. It drills into whale bones using acid secreted through its own skin, dissolving the collagen and lipids inside and absorbing them directly through its tissue. These are not simple creatures. They are engineering solutions to survival without sunlight, and they are alive right now, in the dark, at the bottom of our ocean. Astrobiologists at NASA now consider hydrothermal vent ecosystems the most plausible model for life on Europa. Jupiter's ice-covered moon, which is believed to have a liquid ocean beneath its frozen surface, potentially warmed by tidal flexing and riddled with hydrothermal activity. The monster at the bottom of our ocean may be the template for the universe. If evolution can build an entire biosphere in total darkness at the bottom of our own planet, with no sunlight, no photosynthesis, and no dependence on any surface process whatsoever, what exactly are we still assuming we know about what is down there? Grave-tide serpent. In 1808, a decomposing carcass washed ashore on Stronsa Islet in the Orkney Islands of Scotland. Witnesses measured it at 17 meters. It had what appeared to be 6 distinct limbs and a long tapering neck. Scottish naturalist Patrick Neal collected the testimony and examined the remains, eventually classifying the animal as a new species, designating it Halcedrus pontoppidiani, named after the Norwegian bishop Eric Pontoppidas, who had described sea monster sightings in the North Atlantic decades earlier. The scientific establishment later re-identified the Stronsay beast as a decomposed basking shark, a reasonable conclusion given that shark cartilage decays into configurations that mimic long-necked creatures with startling fidelity. The locals who had measured it were never entirely convinced. The gap between what science accepts and what the ocean actually contains has been closing, slowly and often embarrassingly, for 3 centuries. The giant oarfish, Regalicus glezon, was considered a sailor's fantasy until confirmed specimens began washing ashore in the 19th century. Confirmed individuals reach 8 meters in length. Unconfirmed reports, taken seriously by marine biologists, describe animals approaching 17 meters. The Monterey Bay Aquarium Research Institute captured footage of a living oarfish in 2001, only the second time in recorded history such footage existed. In Japanese maritime folklore, the oarfish is called the Rigu no Tsukai, the messenger from the sea god's palace, and its beaching is considered a warning of earthquakes. 2 oarfish washed ashore in Southern California within 2 weeks of each other in 2013. 3 weeks later, a magnitude 6.1 earthquake struck the region. The giant squid, Architeuthis dux, described in ancient Norse texts as the kraken, a creature capable of dragging ships beneath the surface, was classified as mythology by mainstream science until 1977, when a specimen was recovered intact enough for formal study. It was not photographed alive until 2004, when Japanese researcher Tsunemi Kubodera and his team captured the first images of a living giant squid in its natural habitat, 860 meters below the surface of the North Pacific. The kraken was real. It had been real the entire time. Science simply needed another 2,000 years after the Norse named it to confirm what fishermen already knew. As of 2024, less than 20% of the global ocean floor has been mapped to high resolution. The surface of Mars has been charted more completely than the bottom of our own ocean. New species are recovered regularly, not through dedicated research expeditions, but accidentally by submersibles sent down for industrial surveys and pipeline inspections, by fishing nets hauling up creatures with no names, by cameras pointed at the seafloor for reasons that have nothing to do with biology. Every sea monster that history dismissed as a sailor's nightmare eventually washed ashore and turned out to be real. Which means the ones still out there, the ones we still call myth, are simply the ones that have not washed up yet. The ocean is 4 billion years old. Complex life has existed in it for at least 540 million of those years. Modern humans have been conducting organized scientific observation of its depths for roughly 150. The mirror jelly has been running its alien nervous system for longer than complex animals have existed. The abyss wraith's descendants colonized the dead zones of a dying Devonian ocean and never left. The blackfin horror hunted whales across every ocean simultaneously for 20 million years and left us nothing but teeth. What connects all of these creatures is not their size or their strangeness. It is the patience of the ocean itself, the way it keeps building, keeps experimenting, keeps running designs we never anticipated in depths we have never reached. Every time science has declared the ocean understood, the ocean has produced something that dissolves that certainty completely. If this list does anything, let it be this: leave you less certain that the deep is empty and more curious about what the dark is still holding. If this changed how you see the prehistoric ocean, subscribe and tell us in the comments which of these creatures unsettled you most. The ocean has been building monsters since before animals had eyes to see them. Most of what it has made, we will never find. And some of what we call myth is simply the ocean's way of introducing itself.